Well, we turn now to our continuing coverage of the disaster overseas, where Japan's ocean radiation has hit 7.5 million times the legal limit. This is prompting Japan's government to issue its first ever radiation safety standards for fish. Meanwhile, very much. Along with the new safety standards for fish, the Japanese government has banned shipments of about 60 locally grown farm products in the Fukushima region. Now, that includes spinach, broccoli, and raw milk after high levels of radioactivity were found. Now, back here at home, the EPA is now confirming trace amounts of radioactivity in some drinking water discovered in Richland, Washington, as well as Boise, Idaho. But officials say the levels are too small to be harmful. Joining me now is Tom Crimmins, former director of the American Nuclear Society. Tom, we've been talking about this for weeks now, and it was just last week that the EPA recorded radiation from Japan in milk in California and along the West Coast. So today, these low levels of Japan's radiation in drinking water in Idaho, but officials saying that it's nothing to be concerned about. So in your expert opinion, when is it time to be concerned about finding these trace amounts or levels of radiation in America?
Good afternoon, Thomas. Good to see you. There should not be any concern here in the United States. These levels are very, very low. And in
the plant, fears of contamination continue to spread across the globe. Radiation has now been detected in air samples in 3 separate Minnesota cities.
It's been nearly a month since the monster tsunami hit Japan.
Fears of contamination continue to spread across the globe. Radiation has now been detected in air samples in 3 separate Minnesota cities.
Confirming trace amounts of radioactivity in some drinking water discovered in Richland, Washington, as well as Boise, Idaho. But officials say the levels are too...
It's so predictable that we're 3+ weeks into this crisis. 3 weeks and 5 days. And the European Union, the U.S. government, the Canadian government, they're all discussing, because they don't want to scare the public and actually have people take precautions to protect themselves. And they're saying, well, we're just set to raise the safe levels. The EPA last week said, last Wednesday, yes, we found higher levels of radioactive isotopes in cow milk on the West Coast in 3 states, but we expect these levels to drop. Well, they're obviously not dropping, because the lion's share of that radiation the last 2 weeks is now just arriving and settling in on top of the other radioactive fallout that's been building up day after day of, quote, low-level radiation stacking on top of each other. You stack enough pieces of paper on top of each other, you get a big pile. Well, it's the same thing with radiation. It starts to go up and up and up, and their response is, hey, now it's 7.5 million times normal levels of radiation dumping into the ocean. So what? It's not a problem. And the Japanese say they don't think it'll be a problem for seafood. And the only big country I've seen is India, saying we're banning everything from Japan that's produce coming into this nation. So the U.S. government is set to increase safe radiation levels with strontium by 90 times, 3,000 to 100,000 fold for iodine 131, 25,000 or right below 25,000 time increase for exposure to radioactive nickel 63. And that, of course, is the stuff showing up in the milk and food. So they just magically say it's safe, so it's safe. And they're not warning people. And I'm sorry for dairy producers on the West Coast. Of course, radiation showing up all over the U.S., but I'm sorry for folks over there, but that's where most of the stuff is coming in. That's where the jet stream goes from a higher altitude and dumps in at the lower altitude, and that's where we predicted 3 weeks ago you'd see the first signs of this, and it's in the drinking water as well. And they're not telling people filter the water. They're not telling people get bottled water from out of state. They're not telling people or cities that they should be testing it further. They're not saying don't drink the milk. And I'm sorry for dairy producers on the West Coast, but, I mean, come on. Come on. The feds aren't even testing it. The states have tested it and found higher levels, and they're now telling us they're just going to raise the levels and just forget about it. And people flying in from Japan to U.S. airports for 2.5 weeks have been covered in radiation, and they don't even take their shoes away from them that have the most of it on it. They just tell them go on into the U.S. So the policy is just don't worry about any of this. Toyota did last week come out and put out a little advisory to those that had just bought cars, saying there could be radiation in your car because of the fallout over there. It's just incredible that all of this is going on and that the media is playing it down. And this is a big deal. And how many apples go on your store shelves from California? How many strawberries? How much milk? I mean, there are literally hundreds of different produce products that come out of California that produces a lot of our food, a lot of really good food. Everything from artichokes to green beans to blueberries. I mean, you name it, it's grown there. Grapes. I mean, the list, it just goes on and on. Wine that's being picked right now, and people will be drinking this wine in a couple of years from now. A lot of the radiation will break down by then, but it'll still have the toxic effects of these chemicals. It's basically immeasurable. As the plant radiation monitor said today, that the levels are immeasurable. A radiation monitor in troubled Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant says workers there are exposed to immeasurable levels of radiation. The monitor told NHK that no one can enter the plant's number 1 or 3 reactor buildings because radiation levels are so high that monitoring devices have been rendered useless. It's off the charts, but they're dumping into the ocean 7.5 million times at least safe levels. He said even levels outside the building exceed 100 millisieverts. And it continues, pools and streams of water contaminated with highly radioactive isotopes are being found throughout the facility. The monitor says he takes measurements as soon as he finds water because he can't determine whether it's contaminated just by looking at it. He said he's very worried about the safety of the workers there. Contaminated water and efforts to remove it have been hampered. Much needed work to cool the reactors. The monitor expressed frustration, linking the situation to looking up mountains that one has to climb without having taken a single step. It's just that high. Here's another New York Times article. U.S. sees array of new threats at Japan's nuclear plant. Continued meltdowns, explosions, unable to plug all the different leaks from the explosions because you've got pipes going into the containment areas, breach containment. It just goes on and on.
Eventually, those areas will be cleaned up, and that food will be restored to the marketplace.
And you talk about eventually that it's going to be cleaned up, but what is the long-term outlook as we continue to monitor the situation there that they don't have under control?
Well, that's a good question. It's going to take probably weeks or months to really get the cooling systems going in the plant so that they can stop this tremendous amount of leakage, because right now we're putting water in the plant and we don't have a way to circulate it so that it doesn't get out into the plant. So stopping that, getting a recirculation system where the water is cooled outside of the containment and then put back into the containment to cool reactor is the thing that needs to be done. And they're talking about weeks to months to do that. Then it will be months, many months, before a full characterization of the environment is undertaken and decisions can be made about what food is okay to eat.
Tom, you always bring a